Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really challenging set of sources you've shared with us. We're focusing on the humanitarian crisis unfolding in the Gaza Strip, specifically looking at the allegations and evidence around famine. It's tough stuff.
It is definitely a heavy topic, but our mission here is, to cut through the noise, get to the core insights from these documents. We'll look at the history, the immediate triggers, what's happening now, the reality on the ground, and also the conflicting views on aid, accountability, international law.
What?
It's complex.
Yeah, our goal is to equip you with a clearer picture, really, backed by the facts and figures in these reports. We'll delve into the human cost, the damage to infrastructure, those intense debates about responsibility. Basically give you the essential knowledge quickly and thoroughly so you can be genuinely well-informed. Okay, so let's start with right now. The immediate snapshot. These reports paint a truly grim picture. The entire population of the Gaza Strip is at high risk of famine. That's the headline figure. Back in October 2024, the World Food Program was already warning that 1 million people were at risk of actual starvation.
And the projections for, July 2025, they indicate that 100% the entire population is experiencing high levels of acute food insecurity. About 20% are facing catastrophic levels. And this isn't just, abstract hunger. People are dying. As of July 26, 2025, the Gaza Health Ministry reported 122 deaths confirmed from starvation. And other reports from mid-July mentioned at least 76 children and 10 adults dead from malnutrition during this conflict.
The impact on children, it's just heartbreaking to read about. In August 2024, the UN reported that cases of childhood malnutrition detected in northern Gaza, they'd increased by 300% compared to just May. 300%. And then by April 2025, the Gaza Media Office announced over 65,000 cases of acute malnutrition in kids. UNICEF also pointed out that acute malnutrition among children under 2, it doubled in just 1 month, back in March 2024.
Yeah, and groups like Doctors Without Borders, MSF, they reported in July 2025 that 1 in 4 young children and pregnant or breastfeeding women coming to their clinics were malnourished. At their Gaza City clinic, rates of severe malnutrition under 5s tripled in 2 weeks. So this signals, not just hunger, but a critical fast decline in nutritional health. It leads to situations where, as one pediatrician put it, sadly, even newborns are emaciated.
Right. It's easy to see this just as a sudden crisis, given how awful things are now. But when you dig into these sources, a longer, deeper issue emerges, this idea of thoroughly planned impoverishment. What do the reports say about that?
That's a really key point in these documents, yeah. Sarah Roy, she's an expert on Gaza's economy. She argues Israel has, systematically transformed Gaza since 1967, changed it from an economy that was integrated with Israel's to one that's isolated, dysfunctional, and impoverished. And get this, a detail from the early 2000s. A small number of Israeli settlers controlled 25% of the Strip. That included 40% of the arable land and significant water resources. That severely limited Palestinian access, you see.
Okay, and there was a specific turning point mentioned, wasn't there, after the 2006 elections?
Yes, exactly. After Hamas won those elections, Israel designated Gaza a hostile entity. Then came the blockade. And there's that famous quote from Dov Weissglass, a former Israeli official. He said the idea was, and this is a direct quote, to put the Palestinians on a diet, but not to make them die of hunger.
On a diet. Wow. So what did that mean in practice, according to these documents?
Well, diplomatic cables, later published by WikiLeaks in 2008, they revealed Israel actually told the U.S. its plan was to keep Gaza's economy on the brink of collapse. They even calculated the minimum calories needed per person to avoid malnutrition, 2,279 calories a day. And that number was used to determine how many food trucks went in between 2007 and 2010. But, and this is important, the reports note this calculation didn't factor in things like, the collapse of local agriculture because of the blockade itself.
And it wasn't just about overall calories, was it? There were specific items restricted.
Right. Things like pasta, only reintroduced after John Kerry protested. Even things you might consider minor, like honey, coffee, and a peanut butter snack called bamba. These were reportedly banned. The reason given for bamba, according to one source, was to prevent Gilad Shalit's captors to be munching bamba right over his head. Just illustrates the level of control.
So that's the historical backdrop, this long-term economic pressure. But the current crisis really exploded after October 7th, 2023. What happened then?
Absolutely, that was a major escalation point.
Right.
On October 9th, Israel announced a complete blockade. No food, no water allowed into Gaza, and that had immediate devastating effects because Gaza was already so reliant on aid. By October 23rd, the head of the UN World Food Program was saying people were literally starving to death.
And beyond the blockade itself, the reports detail massive destruction of Gaza's own food production capacity.
Yes, widespread damage. Israeli airstrikes hit bakeries, farmland, food stores, vital infrastructure. By October 2023, a fifth of the bakeries were gone.
Oh.
By mid-November, no bakeries operating in the north. The last flour mill was bombed. It systematically dismantled local food systems.
And you mentioned the environmental damage, too. How does that fit into the picture?
It's severe and it's long-term. By March 2024, almost half of Gaza's farmland was destroyed. By January 2025, 80% of its tree cover gone. That destruction, plus, collapsed infrastructure, 50 million tons of debris, it's led to calls for investigating Israel for the war crime of ecocide under the Rome Statute. One report described northern Gaza in June 2024 as basically a wasteland, unable to sustain life.
So you have this dire need, clear warnings of starvation, but getting aid in has been incredibly difficult. What do the numbers show?
The numbers are stark. As of January 9th, the sources state only 6,000 aid trucks had entered since October 7th. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the equivalent of just 12 days' worth of aid before the conflict started. A tiny fraction.
And the process itself. UNICEF called it Kafkaesque. What does that mean on the ground?
It means, according to these reports, incredibly stringent Israeli regulations. Trucks getting turned back for, well, seemingly absurd reasons. A nail clipper and a hygiene kit, zippers on sleeping bags, medical scissors, things like that, stopping entire trucks. And this is despite constant international calls for, unfettered access. The UN Secretary General said easing the suffering requires Israel removing the remaining obstacles and choke points to relief.
It sounds incredibly frustrating. So what are the main reasons cited in these reports for why aid delivery is so hard?
It seems to be multifaceted. First, there are direct allegations that Israel is deliberately blocking aid. USI, the U.S. State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, both concluded in spring 2024 that Israel was blocking food aid. It's important to add, though, that Secretary of State Blinken rejected those findings.
What about other international actors? What are they saying?
Well, critics, like the EU's top diplomat, have flat out accused Israel of using starvation as a weapon of war, intentionally. And you have statements like the one from Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz in April 2025, saying no humanitarian aid will enter Gaza, and blocking this aid is one of the main pressure levers. But then Israeli officials, like Kogat, deny limiting aid. They say there's no food shortage, and they blame Hamas for hoarding supplies. Though the U.S. has said it hasn't seen evidence to back up claims of Hamas aid theft. So you have these very conflicting narratives.
And it wasn't just official actions, right? The sources mention Israeli protesters blocking aid, too.
Yes, that's another layer. Between December 2023 and February 2024, reports describe Israeli activists and families of captives actively blocking aid trucks at crossings like Kerem Shalom. There are accounts of protesters throwing food, stamping on it, even texts suggesting some level of coordination with Israeli police and the army, the IDF.
Okay, then there's this whole controversy around the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHF. What is that, and why is it so controversial?
Right, the GHF. It's a U.S.-backed and Israeli-backed group that started operating in May 2025. The big change was it replaced around 400 UN distribution points with just 4 GHF aid points. 4. This led to massive outcry. The UN, over 170 charities like Save the Children, Oxfam, they accused GHF of politicizing aid, weaponizing aid even. They're demanding it be shut down. The phrase used to describe the situation around these GHF points is chilling. Slaughter masquerading as aid.
Slaughter masquerading as aid. That's incredibly strong language. Why? What's happening at these sites?
It refers to repeated mass killing incidents at these GHF distribution points. The UN Human Rights Office, OHCHR, reported that as of July 34, 2025, 0.859 Palestinians killed while trying to get food since May 27th were killed near GHF sites, out of about 1,373 total killed seeking food in that period. Witnesses, Gaza officials, the OHCHR itself, they attribute these killings to Israeli forces. The GHF and the IDF deny responsibility. They claim only warning shots were fired. Again, conflicting accounts of deadly events.
So these specific GHF sites are hotspots, but are there other attacks on people seeking aid mentioned?
Yes. The research group Forensic Architecture documented over 40 Israeli attacks specifically targeting humanitarian aid seekers. They describe these as systematic. This includes infamous incidents like the Flower Massacre on February 29, 2024. Over 100 people seeking aid died, reportedly from Israeli gunfire, and the drone strike on April 1, 2024 that killed 7 World Central Kitchen aid workers. That got huge international attention.
So we have blockages, controversial distribution changes, attacks. And on top of all that, the sources mention lawlessness and looting hindering aid.
Exactly. It's another major obstacle. Reports describe armed gangs attacking aid trucks, looting them, holding drivers at gunpoint. There was even a UN memo suggesting some criminals might be operating with, this is a quote, the passive, if not active benevolence of the IDF. One specific example cited, November 2024, a UNRWA Peak convoy. Out of 109 trucks, 98 were captured and looted, almost the entire convoy.
With all this happening, it's probably not surprising that accusations of war crimes have surfaced. What specifically do the sources say?
They're very direct. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant's statement on October 9, 2023, declaring the complete siege is often cited. He said, quote, there will be no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals and we are acting accordingly, end quote. That language caused immediate alarm.
And how have international organizations and officials responded to the overall situation?
Groups like Human Rights Watch, various UN experts, many international officials, they've accused Israel directly of using starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, which is a war crime. U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen put it bluntly in February 2024, kids in Gaza are now dying from the deliberate withholding of food. That is a war crime. It is a textbook war crime.
And the International Criminal Court, the ICC.
Yes, the ICC has issued arrest warrants for Israeli leaders, including Netanyahu and Gallant. Part of the basis for those warrants includes allegations of using starvation as a weapon of war. Michael Fakhri, the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food, he went even further in August 2025. He said, Israel has built the most efficient starvation machine you can imagine. Israel is starving Gaza. It's genocide. Strong words. He argues this has been fine-tuned for 25 years and that famine is always political, predictable, and preventable.
So those are the accusations. How does Israel respond according to documents?
Israel vehemently rejects these claims. They insist they don't target civilians. They point to efforts they say they make to evacuate civilians and to facilitate aid. Prime Minister Netanyahu stated in June 2025, there is no starvation in Gaza, no policy of starvation in Gaza, which, interestingly, was a statement even former U.S. President Trump publicly contradicted a month later.
There was also that extremely controversial comment from Finance Minister Smotrich.
Right. In August 2024, Bezalel Smotrich stated that blocking aid to Gaza was justified and moral, even if it caused 2 million Gazans to die.
Right.
He did add he thought the international community wouldn't allow that to happen. That comment drew immediate condemnation from the EU, France, UK, Australia, many places. The Australian foreign minister stated very clearly, the deliberate starvation of civilians is a war crime. There is no justification for it, ever.
It's hard to even comprehend the scale. To help us grasp it, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
What does starvation actually do to the body? The sources describe it grimly.
They do. One emergency doctor quoted called it awful, one of the most undignified and barbaric ways to kill. Basically, in the early stages, your body starts consuming itself, breaking down muscle, tissues for energy, metabolism slows right down, you lose the ability to regulate body temperature, kidney function gets impaired. And critically, the immune system just collapses. You can't heal, can't fight off infections. Now, a healthy adult might survive, maybe 45 to 60 days without food. But after 22 months of war, who in Gaza could be described as healthy? So often death comes from a mix of malnutrition and an infection the body just can't handle anymore.
And this has ripple effects, doesn't it, across generations?
Absolutely. Malnourished mothers are far more likely to have underweight babies, babies with developmental issues. The impact lasts. The experts cited in these sources conclude, whatever label you put on it, crisis, famine, near famine. The reality is people are still being killed by starvation throughout Gaza as the world looks on. One quote described it as worse than famine. This is the most grotesque spectacle of suffering.
We've really gone deep today into, well, an incredibly complex and truly devastating situation. These sources show layers of history, the immediate destruction, the immense challenges for aid, all playing out against this backdrop of fierce global debate and very serious accusations.
Yeah, what really comes through is not just the scale of the suffering, but also how hard it can be to fully grasp, right? There's so much information, but also so many conflicting claims, competing narratives, and the human cost is just undeniable.
So what does this deep dive mean for you listening? It's a stark reminder, isn't it, of how policy decisions and conflict directly impact human lives and the sheer difficulty of trying to provide humanitarian help in a war zone. It leaves us with a tough question, maybe a provocative thought. If knowledge is power, as they say, how can this kind of understanding translate into effective humane action? And what responsibility do we have as people who are now informed when we witness a humanitarian crisis like this unfolding? Something to think about.